Hey friends, Lucas here. I am starting a new segment today of our Sabbath School Daily videos, which is where I'm going to start answering some questions that are commented down or are asked down below in the comments. I see that there are a lot of people that are questioning, that are hungry for answers, that want more knowledge in the Bible. So why not share a little that I know when it comes to some of these questions? So if you do have questions, write them down in the comments across the different platforms that I send out these videos on, and I'm sure that if I can, I'll get to them. If I can't, I'll let you know. All right. But today's our first question comes from Adrian's Amaru. I hope I'm saying that the right way. I'm probably butchering it, but it's Adrian's Amaru 5906. That's the handle of the YouTube user here. And the question is, hi, Pastor, do prophets and apostles still exist today? Why or why not? So that's a really good question. It's really two questions. It's really apostles and then prophets. And so I'm kind of going to divide the question into two. Let's talk about apostles first. The word apostle, it literally means, in Greek, it's the word apostolos, and it literally means person sent or sent person. Now, throughout the history of the Christian church, all the way from the first century up to today, you'll see that the structure of the church has changed, right? It's developed over the years according to the context of the time, the cultural context, the traditional context. You'll see that there is the church that was being persecuted during the medieval times, and you have the church that's being persecuted in those first 3 to 4 centuries by the Roman Empire, and in the first century by the Jews. So you'll see that the structure of the church has changed over time, and according to the different context, right, of that period of time. So you'll see that because of that change, also the different roles in the church has also changed. You have pastors, ministers, apostles, elders, disciples. You have bishops. You have the deacons, and so you'll see that there are several different roles, and these roles, according to their time, they have acted quite differently. So, for example, you'll see that the apostles in that first century church, they were the spokesmen of God, right, and of the church. They went around, they preached. You had the apostle Paul that went around and preached. You have all of these apostles, and while it's not mentioned in biblical scripture, we do have the tradition, the early church tradition, that tells us about several of these apostles that, most of them, or all of them, with the exception of the apostle John, they died the death of martyrs. So they were literally fulfilling the title apostle. The people that were sent. They were going out, sent by God, and you have that impetus in the church coming from the Pentecost, right? That experience of Acts chapter 2, where they are then sent out in Judea and Samaria and then to the ends of the earth. So are there apostles today? Yes, of course there are. You have evangelists, you have pastors, there are people, lay people that are considered as sent because they're going out and they're taking the message of the gospel. So in that sense of the word, person sent, yes, there is an apostle, right? There are apostles. They're being sent by God. In the sense of the first century church, I would say yes as well, right? There are the leaders of the church. Today, you also have leaders. You have the elders. You have pastors. You have worldwide apostles, right? We have people that are in charge of being sent and sending others in different regions. We have, in the case of the Adventist church, you have the divisions, you have the general conference, you have the conferences and the unions, and you have all this superstructure that sends and that coordinates the sending, the apostles. Of course, the sending comes from God. The calling comes from God. But you have the human instruments that are then being used as those who are sending, those who are being sent. And so, yes, I do believe that you have apostles in that context. In the context of people that were there, the 12, right? No, because Jesus, it's not the time that we're living in, right? Jesus isn't here right now. He hasn't called 12 apostles like that, but he does call you and I to go out as those who are sent. So yes. The second question, which has to do with prophets. Are there still prophets? Now, that's a very, very interesting question. It's a very important question to be asked. So the word prophet, it comes from prophemi, which means quite literally, he who speaks or representative of God, he who speaks for God. You'll have the prophets that are prophets of ministry, right? They have a whole livelihood, it spans years or decades. God uses them as prophets in the sense of their ministry, their prophetic ministry. You'll have people such as Isaiah, people such as Daniel, people such as Samuel, people such as Moses. These are prophets. They speak, they're representatives for the Lord, and it encompasses their whole life. You'll have people in the New Testament. The apostles, they were prophets. right? They had the gift of prophecy. The Lord spoke through them. They were representatives of God in that way. The true question is, are there prophets today, or can we wait? Can we await prophets today? Actually, it's interesting. I preached a sermon at my church, I think 2 years ago at this point, specifically about the gift of prophecy in these latter days. I'm actually going to post that sermon here in the channel one of these days, and then you'll be able to watch it if you want. But the question: are there prophets today? The Bible makes it clear through several texts that there would be prophets in the last days. That is not surprising. God is not limited to the prophets of the Bible, and the Bible itself makes that clear. Let me read for you one verse, right, or one portion of verses that describes that very reality. This comes from Joel chapter 2, verse 28. Verse 28 already in itself already says a lot, but I'm going to read all the way up to the end of the chapter, which is verse 32. Look at what it says. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions. And also on my men servants and on my maid servants, I will pour out my spirit in those days. And I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon shall turn and the moon into blood, before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord. And it shall come to pass that whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be deliverance, as the Lord has said, among the remnant whom the Lord calls. There is so much to be digested here in these verses. First of all, you'll see that there is no limitation of gender, right? He says on his men servants and on his maid servants, he will pour out his spirit. It says on your sons and on your daughters. So God uses men just as well as he uses women. There's no limitation there. God is not limited by that whatsoever. Secondly, you'll see that there is a connection here to the time of the end. It references, for example, events that are connected to the end times. You'll see that it says that the earth shall tremble, or the sun will, I'm going to read actually the verse. This is verse 30 and 31. And I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood, before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord. So you see that this is intimately connected to apocalyptic chapters of the Bible. For example, Matthew chapter 28, that speaks about these things. There will be wars and rumors of wars. Why do you think here it says that there will be blood and fire and pillars of smoke? Is that not a reference to wars and rumors of wars? And then it says the moon, before that it says, I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth. These wonders, they have to do with the natural elements, the natural signs. It says the sun shall be turned into darkness, the moon into blood. Are these not references to Matthew 24 and the like? And then it says, before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord. This has to do with the time of the end. This has to do with God's remnant church. It literally says in the last verse, among the remnant whom the Lord calls. So, and here Jerusalem and Mount Zion is symbolic for the children of God. You know that the promises that are made to Old Testament Israel is then transferred to the church in the New Testament. You find that because Israel was unfaithful, the Lord, he then resurrects Israel in the form of the new Israel, which is the church. The whole New Testament is about, you'll see that it's about the church, right? The instructions to the church, which is God's people in this time. It's God's remnant. So you'll see that this mention of the gift of prophecy, it's talking about the time of the end. That in the last days, in the end times, there would be prophets. Now, one of the things that we sometimes lose track of is the fact that when we're reading the Bible in a few months. We're reading the Bible in a year. We're reading the Bible, and sometimes we lose dimension of how much time went between the events mentioned in the Bible. So sometimes when we're reading it, we have the tendency to think that all of these things, they happened kind of like at the same time. And so there's this plethora, there's this overabundance of prophets, an overabundance of miracles and miraculous signs. But when you look at it, when you see the events of the Bible, or the time in which the Bible is written, it's really 1,500 years from Moses all the way up to John. And the Bible is talking about events that go from the beginning of the world all the way up to that first century. If you're including the apocalyptic prophecies, it's talking all the way up to the end of time. So it's not because, these prophets and events and miracles and signs, they seem to be in some ways jumbled up for us that are reading it all at once, that they were. So many people back then, they also asked, well, where are the prophets? Why aren't they here? Where is God? Why isn't God speaking to us? Think about the years that go, the centuries, the 4 centuries that go between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Think about the centuries that go on between Jacob and Moses, right? 400 years that the children of Israel are in Egypt, 200 years in slavery. Of those 400 years, 200 years in slavery, without God saying anything, without a prophet there, without anyone to, we know that the Lord, he did send prophets to the pagan nations, but you don't have a mention of a prophet there. So don't you think that they wondered the same thing that we also wonder? Where are the prophets? Where are these people? Why isn't God speaking? God is speaking. The Bible is here. God's written word is more than enough. We have a lot more than any other generation before us had. So the question isn't, are there going to be prophets? Are there prophets? Yes. Yes. The Bible makes it clear that there would be the spirit of prophecy in the end time. Now, the question is, how do I discern between a true prophet? And that's where I mentioned that in, I think it was yesterday's or the day before's lesson, where I mentioned the five different tests of the prophet, which is, does the prophet endorse the Bible? Does the prophet believe in the humanity and the divinity of Jesus Christ? Does the prophet, does that prophet's prophecies come true? Do the fruits of the Spirit, or are the fruits of the Spirit revealed and made manifest in the life of that person? And finally, are there supernatural and miraculous events that surround the life of that prophet? Now, it's not enough that that prophet fulfills 4 out of the 5 or 3 out of the 5. The prophet might have fulfilled prophecies, he might endorse the Bible and endorse the humanity and divinity of Jesus, and there might be some supernatural things. But if the fruits of the Spirit aren't evident in that person's life, well, that God isn't going to speak through that person. If he makes prophecies, and those prophecies don't come true, well, then it didn't come from God, and we have enough biblical evidence for that reality. I could be quoting verse by verse by verse, but here the video is going to get too long if I do that. I could go into each one of these tests. We could go into each one of these tests and deconstruct, what do they mean? Where's the biblical analysis? But you know what? You're good students of the Bible, and you'll do that. If you do have any additional questions, you can write it down, and I can try to pinpoint, what the question is, and we could talk more about it. But in that sense, yes, there are prophets. The Seventh-day Adventist Church believes that the gift of prophecy was given to a woman called Ellen White. There's a lot that we could say about that. She passes all of the tests of the prophet. We could talk about this. Actually, you know what? Wait for when I share the video of that sermon, and it'll answer a lot of questions on the criticisms given or revealed against Ellen White. And there are quite a few of them. But yes, the church believes that. One thing, and I'll end with this, one thing that's really interesting, all right? And this is it's just an amazing fact, if you will, all right? You'll notice that in the structure of the Bible, for every prophecy, for every specific important event of biblical prophecy, there will be a prophet to make the prophecy, and then there will be a prophet to be there for that prophetic moment, right? So for example, you'll have Enoch. Enoch gave the name of his son Methuselah, which means after this one, the waters will come. And then, so he makes the prophecy, after this one, the waters will come. Who was there to fulfill that prophecy? Noah. Noah was there. You'll have Daniel making the prophecy of the 490 years, right? The 70 weeks. Daniel was there for that prophecy. Who is the prophet that is there for the fulfillment of that? Well, you'll have John the Baptist, right? So you see that through and through, you'll have a prophet to make the prophecy, and you'll have a prophet to be there for the fulfillment of the prophecy. So I'll leave you with a question right here. You have in Daniel chapter 8, Daniel chapter 9, especially Daniel 8, verse 14, you'll have the longest time prophecy of the whole Bible, right? The 2,300 years. And so the question is, you have a prophet that made that prophecy. Who's the prophet that was there for the fulfillment of that prophecy? That'll give you something to think about. So in that spirit, this is it for today. May God bless you. I hope to see you again here tomorrow, right? Sabbath School Daily. So watch our videos. Please remember to like, to share, and to subscribe. That really helps us out. And may God bless you. I'll see you later.